Doop-de-doop-de-doop-de-doo. Good morning. I am live. And this one is basically for you, Max. So if you're out there, um, you've been asking about music stuff. And so I thought today I would do a very interesting exercise that I had a lot of fun doing. It took me about 2 hours, which isn't to say I'm particularly fast, although I am on the fast side. But it's more to say that if you have a good methodology, you can you can break the components of a creative process down into pieces that allow you to have a fairly streamlined procedure that gives reasonably predictable results. So, what was the goal? Well, the goal was to create a musical logo for Blended Planet Pictures. Or maybe you could say Blended Planet Animation, whatever you want to say. And this isn't necessarily the logo I'm going to use. But, hey, Sifter, good morning. So I'm not necessarily going to use this logo, but it was my first attempt, and I'm extremely happy with the way it came out. In fact, when Valerie listened to it, she said, not bad. And when Valerie says not bad, that's like anyone else on the planet saying, oh my God, I can't believe how cool that sounds. Trust me, it came out well. Okay, so let's just look at what our tools are. Okay, the tools are, first of all, Reaper is going to be my composing and orchestrating tool of choice, and you can find Reaper at Reaper FM. Last time I checked. Let me go here. We'll come back to this here in just a second, but I believe where you want to go is Reaper.fm. Yeah, and so now you can download Reaper right now and use it as long as you want. Doesn't cost you a penny. You'll just get a nag screen that says, hey, do you want to register this? Which is $60 unless you want to buy the Pro license, which is like $250. I bought the Pro license when I bought Reaper because I was so impressed with the software, and I was so impressed with the file format, which is a text-based format. What happened was I had a problem with a piece of music, and I was able to open the Reaper file and actually look at the text and fix it. I was able to fix the problem, and it reloaded just fine, and I was so impressed with that. I wanted to support Justin Franco, who is the creator of Reaper, and so I bought the Pro license, but you can actually use it as long as you want for nothing. Okay, so again, we'll come back to this right here in a moment. The other main tool in the toolkit would be this plugin here called Adderall Orchestra. So this is a virtual orchestra that was being sold, as I recall, it was being sold years and years ago, like 20 years ago, for like $300 or something. Adderall was a subsidiary of Roland, who makes the keyboards, and they were basically making virtual instruments there for a while. And they are no longer, and this is what we call abandonware, meaning that they basically have abandoned it and people download it all the time. I think there's a crack out there because I'm not even sure if you need a registration key, but you can find it, and it's really an amazingly capable orchestra compared to ones that you can spend a lot more money for. And like one that I used to use was Garriton. I think they called it the Pocket Orchestra, but it had different names over the years. But you know, ostensibly an amazing orchestra, but in practice I hardly ever used it because I just kept coming back to Adderall again and again. So that's the plugin we're talking about using for the orchestra itself. Okay, so now let's look at this. This is Hook Theory. And I wanted to show you guys this because this is a great website. If you go to hooktheory.com /theory tab /view /John-Williams /Dreamworks logo. So you can go there and search it. I am not going to play the John Williams piece, because if I do, I will surely get zapped with a copyright strike. However, what I can do is play the piano version of it. So when you go to Hook Theory, it's super cool the way they have taken zillions of pieces of music, some almost 30,000 pieces, and you can see the chord structure, the melody, and usually, I would say most of the time, there is a link where it will play either the piano piece, which I'll go ahead and play right now. Well, well, let's rewind it, I guess. Let's rewind to the start. Can we rewind here? Okay. Close enough. It's clearly a little out of time there at the end. So you get the idea. It gives you a really good way to deconstruct a piece of music. And if you go ahead and click this little button here and listen to the YouTube version, you'll hear the actual John Williams piece. So you can do that right now. You can certainly find it. Dreamworks SKG intro logo. Probably if you search that on YouTube right now, you can find that as well. So you can listen to the piece that I was using as reference, okay? So this is called hook theory, and again, super useful tool if you want to understand pieces of music, especially stuff like JW writes, which oftentimes has a lot of really, you know, like some of this stuff, like if they have anything from Indiana Jones, it's going to be pretty gnarly chords, okay? But the cool thing is when you actually do deconstruct the stuff, you usually find out it's actually not as complicated as it sounds. So anyway, with that, we come back to Reaper. Now, let's start. I'm going to play you my piano piece. Not a great piano player, but this was the concept I wanted to work with, okay? So here we go. So mine's in 3/4. Probably the main thing I kind of stole from John Williams in there is there's a transition from a essentially a B minor to a B major, which is it's a motif you'll hear in the Jurassic Park theme as well. So he kind of stole from himself. In the piece we just listened to on Hook Theory, that came later in the piece, whereas for me it came, you know, sort of as a transition to the middle section. Okay? So I'll play the piece one more time so you can kind of see what I did. Again, I'm not a great piano player, and my piece is much slower too, obviously. Let me stop that. This is what I was talking about. It's going from a here's what the structure is actually. It's a G, A minor, B minor, B major to E minor, D transition down to C, G, and then key change B flat, A minor, and then a D7 that transitions. That's what you call a cadence. It's basically a seventh chord that wraps you back around to your main, you know, chord that you're going to end on, which I did not change key for the song. Just there's a key change there in the middle when it goes to B flat. But you could actually argue. I'll leave it at that. I don't want to go too deep on the theory side of how you can look at the music, because you can have two chords that look exactly the same, and how you identify the chord, pretty much it usually boils down to the bass note. You know, what's in the bass kind of tells you whether whether you would identify it as this chord or that chord. But anyway, at the end of the day, there's the piece. Now, this is what my goal was. My goal was to orchestrate it on paper. So I'm going to switch to the big screen here. I'm going to show you what I did. Okay, so the first thing I did, you're not going to be able to see this very well probably, but you can see that I basically made a chord chart, and you'll notice that there's music in there that doesn't really indicate the notes. So what I have, and I'm going to break this down a little bit more here in my paint. So this is kind of my normal technique, because I don't actually like working with manuscript paper. It's kind of an inefficient way of notating things. So for me, what I'll typically do is I'll say, well, I want a G chord. Actually, I don't want to use this marker. Let's use this one. Erase. Okay. So we say, and I'm going to go in maybe a little closer. Okay, so I want a G chord. and then I know I'm going to an A minor. So basically what I'll often do is I'll say, the most important thing in music, you can kind of get away with murder when it comes to mistakes in melodies and chords. Not that you want to, but I'm talking about in live performance. What you find is if you make a note mistake, you know, people might go, oh, that's kind of interesting, or, you know, it's not egregious to the ears necessarily unless it's a really bad mistake. If you're out of time, everybody notices. Okay, so rhythm's the most important thing. So for me, all I need to do when I'm fleshing out an idea is basically I'll go like this. I'll go, okay, I want this to be da 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 da, bum bum bum. Okay, and on we go, and presumably the next bar is probably either going to be a dot. I'm sorry, it's going to be either a dotted half note, since we're in 3/4 time, okay, or I may wind up turning it back to a half note and adding another quarter note in there as a transition to the next bar. But the bottom line is that this tells me almost everything I need to know to remember what I had in mind. Okay, then what I'll often do is what I did here. I'll just go 3, 4, 5. So in the key of G, I'm just writing down what the notes are. Okay. So it's so that's G. Back to 2, I believe, or no, back to 3. And on it goes. And so I'll often do it that way. Once I know what key I'm in, I can usually hum it and kind of figure out what the melody is numerically. And I apologize, you guys. I just blew it. I just blew the stream. I just wrecked this whole stream. I'm gonna do this all over because I was on the wrong screen. Doggone it! I just wasted like 3 minutes of your time. So I apologize, guys. This is the bane of my life, is remembering to change the stupid screens. Okay, let's do this again. So I'm on a normal piece of paper, just lined notebook paper. You guys saw it in the webcam view. Okay, so the keys are G, A minor, B minor, and then in this case what I did was I transitioned within the same bar to B major. Triangle is a kind of a common in Nashville notation, it's kind of a common way to indicate a major chord. So alright, so what I was saying before I so rudely interrupted myself was all I need to know is rhythmically what's going on. Da da da, da da da, da da da, and then on we go. Okay, so as long as I remember that, and then I write down the notes, which in this case were 3, 4, 5. Keep it in mind, I'm giving myself the latitude to change my mind. If I start fleshing the thing out and something's not working, then I'll change it. But basically, this gets me, this really gets me halfway there, because if I know the rhythm and I know the notes and I know the chord, basically I know what I intended. And the truth of the matter is, you can block out any piece of music with 4 notes. If you're gonna try to orchestrate it, you know, 4 notes usually does the trick. If you're trying to deconstruct a piece of music and understand it, what you usually want to do is look at the melody and then look at the bass note. If you look at the melody and the bass note, you can usually figure out what the chord is. And then when you sort of find what key you're in, you're like, oh, I see what they did. That's kind of the way that normally goes. Okay, so this is my method on paper. The only thing I would add to this is this. If I'm working on lined paper, sometimes what I'll do is I'll mark an area like this, and I'll say, okay, well, this is the French horns, and maybe this is on a piano keyboard. This is going to be in octave 3. So I'll have this kind of notation, and then actually below it, I might say, okay, well, here's the trombones, which are in octave 2. You know, an octave down, and then I might say, well, that's going to be doubled with the cello, stuff like that. So this is a very compact notational method that allows me to see what I intended. Again, that's the important thing. I remember what I meant to do, because I'm not necessarily going to go ahead and orchestrate it right then, right? It's kind of important to remember what you had in mind. So that's that. That's my methodology. It's pretty simple and straightforward. Now, I'm going to blab here for a minute, because these are some of the things that I noticed. And again, I don't want to play the John Williams tune, because if I do, and I just showed you where to find it, I'll put it up on the screen actually right now again. So this is at Hook Theory. If you go to hooktheory.com and search for John Williams, and then find the where the heck is it now? Well, you search for it, you'll find it. I'm just kind of fudging here because it's not in the quick list. So anyway, but you can find this. So if you want to listen to it, go to Hook Theory, find this, and then click to YouTube instead of piano, so that you can hear what the orchestration sounds like, because that's what I'm about to talk about, is the orchestration. Here's what I noticed. Number one, when the piece starts, the melody is handled by a harp. The ba 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 ba. Initially, I was thinking there'd be some sort of pizzicato underneath it or something, and I did put that in there, but the main point was that the thing starts out with a harp melody. I thought, well, I could use an acoustic guitar for that too, just to be a little different. And then what happens is, as you get through those first few chords, so I'll use the piano piece to illustrate this. So this would actually be harp. Right there, you're going to start to hear French horns coming in and delineating the melody, taking over the melody from the harp. Okay? And so what I observed in the John Williams piece is that once you get to the middle section, then you've got pretty strong trombones coming in underneath it, punching the chords. And what I found really interesting about it was that there was no real transition into that section. I thought, that's cool. I mean, that's a bold choice to just go from the lighter sound to boom right into the stronger sound. Okay, so these are, and I'm sharing this with you, so these are the kind of notes I take, because I'm breaking down in my mind. I'm saying, okay, I want to know what happens orchestrally during the piece to make it feel the way it feels. Okay, so the middle section is pretty much ruled by French horns, and that are over top of chords that are being played by trombones. Then when you get to the transition, you're driving to the end of the piece. Okay, so I'll show you what that is on piano. Right here, actually no, here it's getting big, the trumpets take over. And then one of the really interesting things about the John Williams piece is you get right to the end here, and everything drops out right there. So that one quarter note before the what ostensibly you would think is like the big finish actually isn't a big finish. The whole thing gets quiet again. And then there's a little figure that echoes the original harps after everything gets quiet, and you hit the final chord, which of course is a G in this case, right? So in other words, the key change is marked by the trumpets taking over the melody and a much stronger melody going on. Right here, trumpets. They're big, and then up drops out, and then you hear a little echo of the bum 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 with the harp again at the end. So really, really nice orchestration, very courageous orchestration. Not a lot of transitional connective tissue, actually. There is some, but not a ton. And when you're a lame-o orchestrator like me, you tend to overdo certain things like that to sort of protect yourself. And what I'm learning to do more and more is to be a little more courageous with the way I orchestrate things. So just to finish up the notes, actually that's really about it. So now there's only a couple people watching, because this probably isn't very interesting to most people who are into animation. But the question is, it's really up to you guys now, because I'm gonna play my piece. You'll see what I did with it. I'll play the piano piece first, and then you can compare and see what it turned into orchestrally. And then it's up to you guys. Hey, Dominic, it's up to you guys if you want me to go through and break down bit by bit, part by part, how I dealt with the orchestration. I'll do that if you want me to. If you don't, then we'll just leave this live stream short and say, hey, the point was we've got a half hour showing how you go from a basic musical idea to a final orchestrated piece. And really it's the notes that I just reviewed with you that kind of inform what I did. The only thing that's kind of missing from the John Williams piece that I emphasized a little bit more was the string section. Okay, just to give a little bit more fat to the chords and stuff in certain places. So again, I'm going to play the piano piece, then I'll play the orchestrated version. Okay, what right here, by the way, that note right there was kind of wrong because it goes down and it really kind of needed to go back up to drive through to the finish. So Max, I got your your note there, and I will go ahead and you see how when it goes down it doesn't lead you to that final G chord. Okay, let me mute the piano and now you can hear what the final orchestrated version sounds like. Okay, I heard one thing that bugs me that I want to fix right now while I'm thinking about it. Let me listen. Right there. I think that was in the French horn. There's a note that's too early. So if I mute this, it's actually a little early in the string suite. Okay, so I'm going to turn on the click. Yes, right there. Oh my gosh. Boom, baby. So now I'm going to double click, and that brings me to the Midi stuff. Okay. And let me just pull back here. Right there. Oh my gosh, that's horrible. Now, to be fair, a lot of the notes in this thing are coming in slightly early. You know, there's a real legato feeling to it. So I didn't quantize all my parts. Sometimes I would, but for this I didn't. So if things get a little sloppy here and there, that can be okay. It's a balancing act that you go through. Okay, so frankly, that brings me to the next step in my my notes of what I wanted to cover, which is you have to massage the Midi. There really is no way around it. There were lots of cases where I would go in and I would say, hey, this note was, and I would just, you can see that as you lower the velocity, it causes the timbre to change. That's one of the cool things about this orchestral plugin. That feels pretty good. Okay, so you guys are saying, yeah, go ahead and break it down. So what I'm going to do is I'm kind of improvising now. So what I'm going to do is, as best I can, remember what I did. Okay? From what I recall, the first thing I did was I probably shouldn't do it in the order I did it, because actually what happened was I did the whole thing and then went back and clarified the harp as the key melody instrument at the start. So let's just start there. That was actually an amendment to what I wound up with originally, but let's just go with it this way. So the harp goes, I'll turn the click off. Okay, so now you might wonder, when you listen to you know, Vangelis is an amazing guy because of, you know, his custom keyboard he has that allows him to, you know, he uses pre-recorded stuff as well, but what he does all by himself on a keyboard live is pretty impressive. Anyway, so the challenge with a really good composer, and I don't want to give JW all the credit because his orchestrators do a really good job too. His orchestrators are key, and I can't remember the guy's name who does all of his orchestrations for him, are absolutely key to the sound, you know, that he gets. But a lot of times when you hear those little glissandos and transitional things, it becomes a bit of a mush, and you go, what the heck just happened? You know? So it's like anything, you build up a toolkit of techniques that you kind of go, well, this works. So what I did here, all I did, I knew I was going to get to a C chord, okay? The next chord I was going to land on was a C. So what I said, well, okay, we'll use all the white keys on the keyboard. So I literally took the keyboard and just went and made a glissando, and then did the same thing a little bit later. I think the second one was an octave lower. And it just added a nice, because what I was seeing in my mind was this. I was seeing a harp player very gently going like this and then building it up. Well, I couldn't quite reproduce that, but I could kind of come close-ish. So there's your melody. And then basically the harp's out of the game. Okay? So now I believe the next thing on my agenda was probably where I actually started was the strings. So I wanted something, what you don't want to do with orchestras is a lot of block chords like you would play on a piano. Good morning, Maria. If you use block chords like on a piano, it is true that the place where you can get away with it the most probably is in the string section. But I mean, anybody will tell you that normally you probably want to break up those chords between the different instruments of the string, or the string section. And also importantly, probably one of the biggest things you want to remember is don't lose sight of voice leading, meaning that if you're going from chord A to chord B, you want to consider the fewest, the shortest distance to the notes in the next chord. And so what piano players like playing, simple rock and roll, you play a C chord and then you want to play an F, you actually just pick up your hand and move it up to start on F, right? So you got F, A, C versus the C chord, which is, C, E, G. Okay. Normally with orchestration, you don't want to do that because it really gives away the fact that it's a virtual orchestra. Okay. So think about voice leading at all times, because it also informs your orchestration process, because you realize if I'm going to keep this orchestral instrument on the chord, giving chordal support, harmonic support to the melody, and in order to have good voice leading, the note's going to go down because maybe it's only a half step. Maybe the highest note in the chord to the next chord is only a half step change. So you want to go down because the gravity wants to pull you that little half step. Okay, that's a strong pull. Well, if the melody goes up, then what does that tell you? That tells you this is probably a place where a different instrument needs to take over the melody, right? Think about that. And then that makes you think about things like, well, okay, maybe in the half bar before that instrument takes over, they may quietly ease in and take over the melody with a little bit of a hint that it's about to happen, that sort of thing. So I hope that makes sense. So in the string section, let's just play the string section. So I can tell you that I know what I did here. I had, and the final chord, it's just basically, I just wanted to fatten up what happens at the end, and this was added at the end, basically, just to fatten up the ending. Okay, but if we look at this, what we see is, what I wanted to do was describe a melody, and I didn't want to get into chords with this particular instrument. Basically is a full string section, so it's a good utilitarian string section that lets you use the full range of the keyboard if you want to. It's generally not a great idea too much, because you do have good violins, good cellos that you can use that make everything sound a little more real. Okay, so right here I needed this transition. So very quietly I allowed the high strings chordally to push us into this new section. And then this was a late addition, two extremely high two-note chords. Technically it's not a chord, it's just a harmony. A chord technically is really 3 notes or more, but we'll let that one go. So you can barely hear them. And if you get too loud with these, it kind of wrecked the piece for me. So I was kind of careful not to let those get too loud. Okay, so the choice of, there's a lot of leaps, let's just say. Okay, if the only purpose of this string section was to support the chords, and it wasn't technically the melody instrument at that point, you could argue that, geez, Dave, you got a lot of leaps in here. It's likely that we are not adhering as closely to the chord progression in terms of voice leading as we could with this string section. And that would be a valid criticism. At the end of the day, is what sounded good, you know? Okay, so now I guess what I'll do, since you guys want the breakdown, is I'll go through it section by section, and then we'll kind of begin to look at how the pieces came together, the sections came together. Okay? Right from the beginning, I had a choice. Do we want that strong bottom or not? And it was kind of like, yes, if it's not too loud. Okay, so you can hear where everything dropped out and got quiet again. You know, just like what happens in the John Williams piece. And by the way, if you guys go to Hook Theory and listen to the John Williams piece it's based on, you will agree that my piece sounds absolutely nothing. It has a similar feeling orchestrally to the John Williams piece, but it sounds nothing like it. It's a completely different piece. So I chose, and that's a little out of time, but we'll let that go for the moment. So with the cellos, what I chose to do is let's do a pizzicato to fatten up the bottom. So if you listen, so da 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 bum bum bum. So the fourth time it's coming back down, and then it kind of becomes very occasional, like boom. This is the build up. And then, of course, there's no need for the pizzicatos at the end because the ending is very legato. It's all spread out. You don't want a lot of punctuation and percussion. Didn't use the violas. Violins, didn't use them much. Just and you can hear the saw of the violins here. There's a little more edge to the strings. They're not as smooth and pretty as sort of synth strings usually are. So you get a little more authenticity with the, if you actually use a violin section. And by the way, Adderall Orchestra also has a bunch of solo instruments. It's not all sections, right? Okay, so I had a percussive thing in there at one point, and I just felt like it was heavy-handed and overused, it just seemed gratuitous. Like, oh, that's the obvious thing to do is put in a with the cymbal, and it's not there in the John Williams piece. So I'm like, okay, Dave, grow up, just follow the plan, and don't get carried away with percussion and stuff. Same with the timpani. I don't even know if there's any timpani in the JW piece. I just put in very, very helping punch the build up, but then very soft at the end. Just enough to give a little bit of a sound that decays naturally to let the piece end, really. That natural decay was kind of useful. Okay, so the trombones were really important. Once you get to the middle section, okay, I'll play it with the whole orchestra and you'll see what I'm talking about. So it's all kind of soft and light. And then per the Williams piece, once you get to the next section, you've got this. And then they drop out. Okay, so what are the trombones actually doing? Simple 2 and occasionally 3 note chords, just as simple as can be, and that is emblematic of John Williams. You know, you often get this stuff that sounds so gorgeous, and then when you pick it apart, you realize, God, it's so simple. That's it. Yeah, a little push there. Sounds kind of abrasive all by itself. Let's see what it sounds like orchestrally. Yeah, you can see it has a reason to be there. That's for sure. So this is where the Midi massage was really important. I went through and quite a few of these notes, I would just go in and fine-tune their velocities so that the harmony felt right. And the other thing about that was that the way I've got things set up here is I have MIDI controllers that let me control the modulation wheel. And actually, let me see what our number is here. I'll say this is 55. So let me show you this. This is kind of important, actually. If we set this to the default. Okay, now listen to how the timbre changes when I change the mod wheel. It isn't just a stupid filter. It's not just a a 4-pole high pass filter or low pass filter. It's not. They've actually got samples of muted trombones in there. Really, really nice. So I chose 55. That felt about right. So the default trombones were just a little too bitey, a little too pointed. So. Okay, the trumpets were pretty important too. I think what I'll do is leave the trumpets and trombones in together to show you how they work together. What happens is in the build up to the finish, those trumpets come in and they become really, really important. Dominic says play the whole piece. Okay, I'll play the whole piece. In fact, I'll do what I did in the start. What I'll do is I'll play you the piano piece that was the model for it, and then I'll play the orchestral version. I'm not a great piano player. So you can hear some sloppiness right about here, and that's just because, excuse me, I kind of knew what I was going to do, but not exactly, and I knew I'd be polishing that up at the orchestration stage anyway. So here's the whole thing. You can barely hear how the timpani is just enough there so it decays, so the whole thing just goes down to silence kind of smoothly. Okay, so I hope that's what you wanted to hear, Dominic. So where we were at was the trombones and the trumpets. Actually, I think what I'll do in this case is give you the brass, okay, because the French horn was enormously important in this piece. Yeah, and in isolation, this last chord for the trombones is pretty abrasive. I mean, it really kind of sounds bad. But in the context of the whole piece, it gives an extra push that I think sounded pretty good. Because you'll notice there's no percussive transitions like shh. There's very little connective tissue between these sections. It just goes from one to the next. And again, that's one thing I like about JW is the boldness and the clarity and the simplicity. And you see how the trumpets, they're basically 2-note chords as I recall. Yes, 2-note chords. And then it was really clear to me that if this last one right here was a chord, all of a sudden it just like took over. It was too much. So I had to... and then get the heck out because we needed to get quiet there at the end. It's not a big finish, it's a small finish. Okay, so the other part of this would be the woodwinds. The clarinet and the flute are just there only to provide chordal support. And that's the way it was in the JW piece. And if you listen to it on Hook Theory, you'll agree. Okay, so it's basically chords. Ba-ba. And it's an answer. They're not driving the chord. They're giving the textural response to the chord. So it's 2, 3, 1. 1. See? And if they were that's probably another good example of the kind of thing you hear in the JW orchestration, is that, you know, it would be tempting to say, hey, we're providing chordal support with these instruments. Let's punch the 1 beat of the measure, you know, with them. And then what you find is all of a sudden it gets too thick and heavy-handed, you know. So that seems like that's pretty much it. Okay, so are there any questions, class? I will simply ask if there's any questions, and if not, I'll just do a quick recap and say that if you want to hear the orchestration of what it was modeled on, it was the Dreamworks logo by John Williams, which I found on hooktheory.com. And Hook Theory is great because of what I'll show you right here. So you can see what the chords are, the melody, in a piano roll view. And so quite useful. And then if you click this little thing that says YouTube, it'll actually play the YouTube right here in this little window. It'll play it from YouTube, so you can hear the real orchestration that Williams used. And so you guys can rewind to the beginning of this video to see the notes that I took to, you know, what I heard happening in each little part of that piece. And so final run here. Here's the final result again, and then I think I will be done for this live stream session. If there's any questions, post them. Okay, looks like there's no questions. So, yeah, the Maria, the correlation between Williams and not just Holt's The Planets, although that is one that comes up a lot in discussions about the Star Wars music, but there's no question that JW has borrowed from the classics, you know, a lot, and we all do. So it's all good. So, okay, it looks like there's no questions. Everything's pretty straightforward. And so with that, I think I will sign off. As you guys know, there will be more